Prime Minister Mark Carney is preparing to navigate one of the most diplomatically sensitive weeks of his leadership as he departs Friday for a series of crucial Indo-Pacific summit meetings, one of which will bring him face to face, directly or indirectly, with both U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. For Carney, this trip is not just another round of international diplomacy, it's a high-wire act that could shape Canada's trade and foreign policy trajectory for years to come. At the heart of the challenge lies the difficult balancing act of maintaining Canada's close relationship with Washington while cautiously rebuilding a strained connection with Beijing. Both relationships have been tested in recent months, and the timing of this trip couldn't be more delicate. Even before Carney's plane left the tarmac, tensions with the U.S. escalated dramatically after President Trump abruptly announced that he was terminating all trade negotiations with Canada. The trigger, a controversial advertisement released by Ontario's provincial government that aired in the United States and featured selective clips of former U.S. President Ronald Reagan warning about the dangers of tariffs. Trump publicly blasted the ad as fraudulent and fake, accusing Canada of manipulating Reagan's legacy to score political points. His fiery response, delivered late Thursday night on social media, appeared to catch Ottawa completely off guard. Federal officials scrambled to assess the implications as Carney's delegation finalized preparations for his upcoming meetings. Both Trump and Xi are expected to attend the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation (APEC) summit in Jeonju, South Korea, scheduled for October 31 and November 1. The picturesque city will serve as the backdrop for what could become one of the most consequential diplomatic gatherings of the year. According to senior Canadian officials, Ottawa is actively seeking a bilateral meeting between Carney and Xi to address rising trade tensions and explore potential avenues for economic cooperation. However, that meeting has not yet been confirmed. Meanwhile, all eyes are on the anticipated meeting between Trump and Xi, which U.S. diplomats hope will help defuse the escalating trade war between the world's two largest economies. Yet, uncertainty looms. Beijing has not confirmed whether Xi will meet Trump one-on-one, and Chinese officials have hinted that the agenda may depend on the tone Washington sets in the coming days. For Canada and other allied nations caught between these superpowers, the stakes couldn't be higher. The U.S.-China confrontation over tariffs, technology access, and market dominance has sent ripples through the global economy, forcing smaller nations like Canada to find a careful middle ground. As Najibul Avina, Vice President of the Asia-Pacific Foundation of Canada, explained, middle powers like Canada are trying to navigate between two giants locked in strategic competition. The key challenge is not getting trapped in their disputes while still defending national interests. Canada's relationship with China, once cautiously optimistic, has deteriorated in recent months. The Carney government's decision to impose a 100% surtax on Chinese electric vehicles triggered swift retaliation from Beijing, which slapped tariffs on Canadian canola and seafood exports. Adding to the tension are national security concerns following the recent inquiry into foreign interference in Canadian political institutions, a topic that continues to cast a shadow over Ottawa's dealings with Beijing. Whether Carney will meet with Trump during his trip remains uncertain. The two leaders only recently met at the White House, and Trump's decision to suspend trade discussions has left future talks in limbo. Still, Carney struck a diplomatic tone before departing, telling reporters that Canadian negotiators have been engaged in constructive discussions with their American counterparts. Canada stands ready to pick up on that progress and build on that progress when the Americans are ready to have those discussions, he said, before declining to take further questions. The Trump administration, meanwhile, has doubled down on its hardline approach toward China, with senior officials warning allies to be wary of Beijing's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region. For Canada, that warning only underscores the tightrope Carney must walk in the coming week, balancing economic necessity, national security, and international diplomacy in a geopolitical landscape where even a single misstep could carry lasting consequences. As the Prime Minister's plane ascends toward Asia, the stakes are clear: maintaining Washington's trust without alienating Beijing, protecting Canadian trade interests without becoming collateral damage in a superpower showdown. The world will be watching closely to see whether Carney can navigate the storm, or whether Canada, once again, finds itself caught in the crossfire of global rivalry. The early morning light over Ottawa was still dim when the engines of the Prime Minister's plane roared to life, signaling the beginning of what could become one of the most defining and perilous weeks of Mark Carney's tenure as Canada's leader. He stood at the top of the aircraft steps, his expression composed but unreadable, the kind of calm that conceals the weight of 1,000 unspoken calculations. Before him stretched a diplomatic journey that would pull him between two great powers, the United States and China, each demanding loyalty, respect, and strategic obedience. It was a journey that would test not only Carney's political instincts but also Canada's ability to survive in the turbulent crosswinds of global rivalry. The Indo-Pacific summit circuit had long been considered a proving ground for world leaders, but this year, the stakes were unprecedented. The region had become the epicenter of economic and geopolitical competition, and for Canada, a country striving to project independence while maintaining its alliances, the balancing act was as delicate as it was dangerous. The trip was meant to strengthen ties, rebuild trust, and reaffirm Canada's role as a reliable player in the global arena. Yet before the Prime Minister's jet had even lifted off the runway, the entire mission was overshadowed by an unexpected and explosive development that left his government scrambling for composure. Late the previous night, U.S. President Donald Trump abruptly announced the termination of all ongoing trade talks with Canada, citing outrage over a political advertisement running in American media. The ad, commissioned by Ontario's provincial government, had struck a nerve in Washington. It featured a selectively edited clip of former President Ronald Reagan warning against tariffs, using his words as a veiled criticism of Trump's trade policies. The message was subtle but unmistakable, and Trump, never one to ignore a perceived slight, erupted in fury. Taking to social media, he branded the advertisement fraudulent and fake, accusing Canada of meddling in American economic discourse and of distorting Reagan's legacy to undermine his administration. The backlash was immediate and severe. Within hours, the White House issued a formal notice suspending trade discussions, catching Canadian officials completely off guard. The timing could not have been worse. The diplomatic and economic relationship between Ottawa and Washington had already been under strain following disputes over steel, aluminum, and clean energy subsidies. Now, just as Carney was preparing to embark on a journey intended to strengthen Canada's position in Asia, he found himself confronting an unexpected rupture with his country's closest ally and largest trading partner. Inside the Prime Minister's office, the reaction was one of stunned disbelief. Aides exchanged hurried phone calls with their American counterparts, hoping to clarify whether the decision was final or merely another of Trump's impulsive outbursts. But as dawn broke, it became clear that the U.S. president meant every word. The Canadian delegation, though visibly rattled, pressed on with preparations. Carney, true to his reputation as a steady hand in crisis, refused to display panic. When he appeared before reporters that morning, his demeanor was calm, measured, and deliberate. "We've been having constructive negotiations with our American partners," he said evenly. "Canada stands ready to build on that progress when the Americans are ready to have those discussions." With that, he turned away from the cameras, declining to take questions, leaving the press to speculate on the deeper meaning behind his restraint. As his aircraft ascended into the sky, the world below seemed divided between two gravitational forces pulling in opposite directions. On one side was Washington, still smarting from perceived betrayal. On the other was Beijing, whose own relationship with Ottawa had grown increasingly fraught in recent years. Both President Trump and President Xi Jinping were expected to attend the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in the historic Korean city of Jeongju at the end of the month. The event was supposed to be a platform for cooperation, but instead, it loomed as a battlefield of influence, where every handshake, every smile, and every word would carry the weight of global consequence. For Canada, the summit offered both risk and opportunity. Federal officials, speaking discreetly before the trip, revealed that Carney was seeking a bilateral meeting with President Xi, hoping to ease tensions that had flared following a series of bitter trade disputes. Whether that meeting would happen, however, remained uncertain. The Chinese government had yet to confirm, leaving Ottawa in a state of cautious anticipation. Meanwhile, the United States was pursuing its own high-stakes encounter with Beijing, as Trump's team sought to cool the escalating trade war that had sent shockwaves through global markets. Yet even that meeting was in jeopardy, as Chinese officials hinted that their participation might depend on Washington's tone and